The UK property market isn't crashing, it isn't collapsing, and it isn't failing in the way most people think. What's happening is quieter than that. The market is being finished, slowly, deliberately, and almost invisibly. Not with headlines, not with panic, not with chaos, but with capital. By 2030, owning a home in the UK, whether to live in or to rent out, may not just be difficult, it may be structurally unrealistic for the average person. And the reason isn't interest rates, it isn't immigration, it isn't even government incompetence, it's ownership. Ownership in Britain is changing hands. If you follow the money, not the media, a very different picture emerges of what's really happening to housing in this country. Because while individuals are being told that property is risky, landlords are leaving, and buying is irresponsible, the largest institutions in the world are doing the opposite. They are buying, they are building, and most importantly, they are not selling. This isn't speculation, it's visible in balance sheets, planning permissions, and long-term investment strategies. Before we go any further, if you care about understanding what's actually happening in the UK property market, beyond headlines, politics, and media noise, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to UK Property Report. This channel exists to follow the money, explain the structure behind the stories, and give you the context most people only realise when it's already too late. Now, let's continue.
Let's start with one example that rarely gets discussed honestly: Lloyds Living. Previously known as Citra Living, Lloyds Living is owned by Lloyds Banking Group, one of the largest financial institutions in the UK. As of recent disclosures, Lloyds Living owns more than 7,000 residential rental properties across Britain. Their stated target? 50,000 homes by 2030. That is not accidental growth, that is a long-term strategy. Lloyds Banking Group is not just a bank, it is a mortgage lender, a savings institution, a financial educator, and now one of the fastest-growing residential landlords in the country. Think carefully about what that means. A company that takes deposits from the public, that lends money to buyers, that decides who qualifies for mortgages, that influences interest rates through market power, and that educates children and adults about financial responsibility, is also directly competing with those same people to buy housing. That isn't a conspiracy, it's vertical integration. When a bank profits from savings, lending, and asset ownership at the same time, incentives change. The bank no longer needs millions of homeowners, it needs tenants. And when lending becomes tighter, as it has, the outcome is predictable. More renters, fewer owners, more institutional control. Lloyds Banking Group is not alone. Its largest shareholders include some of the biggest asset managers in the world, including BlackRock. And BlackRock is not a fringe player. BlackRock manages roughly $10 trillion worth of assets globally. Not all of that money belongs to them, much of it belongs to pensions, governments, insurance funds, and institutions. But BlackRock decides where that money goes. And an increasing share of it is going into residential property. Not just in the United States, not just in Europe, but very deliberately into the UK. Why? Because housing is no longer viewed as shelter. It is infrastructure. It produces predictable cash flow. It is resistant to inflation. It is scarce, and it is politically protected. Now here's the part most people miss. When individuals buy property, they usually buy one or two homes. They might sell, they might downsize, they might exit. Institutions don't behave like that. When institutions buy housing, they plan to hold it for decades, sometimes indefinitely. That single difference changes everything. It removes supply permanently, and it explains a strange contradiction in the UK market. The media says landlords are selling. That part is true, but prices aren't collapsing. Why?
Because the buyers replacing small landlords are not first-time buyers. They are funds, insurance companies, bank-backed landlords, pension vehicles, and they have no pressure to sell. Now consider Legal & General. Legal & General is not just an insurance company, it is one of the largest asset allocators in the UK. They are heavily involved in residential development, particularly build-to-rent housing. On their own materials, they state that they build and sell and build and rent. That sounds balanced, but in reality, the vast majority of their developments are retained, not sold. From a capital perspective, this makes perfect sense.
Why sell an asset once when you can collect rent indefinitely and benefit from long-term price appreciation? Selling provides cash. Holding provides power. The same pattern appears with Aviva. Aviva has expanded aggressively into residential property, again focused on long-term rental portfolios. These companies are not reacting to housing shortages, they are positioning for a future where renting is the default and ownership is the exception. And this future aligns neatly with broader economic trends: urbanization, labor mobility, debt saturation, rising construction costs. Which brings us to something critical. The cost of building a house in the UK has surged. Construction firms routinely confirm that building a modest two-bed home can now cost £200,000 or more before land. Yet in parts of the north, existing homes can still be bought for under £100,000. That gap cannot last forever. Either build costs collapse, which is unlikely, or prices rise to meet them. Institutions understand this. That's why they are building at high cost and holding. They are anchoring future valuations. When the replacement cost of housing increases, existing stock becomes more valuable. This is basic economics, and it explains why institutional buyers are comfortable paying prices that individuals find frightening. They are not buying for today, they are buying for 2035. Now zoom out. Why do governments allow this? Because these institutions are intertwined with the system. They manage pensions, they fund infrastructure, they buy government debt, they provide stability during crises. In 2008, when banks nearly collapsed, governments stepped in. Lloyds Banking Group was partially nationalised to prevent systemic failure. That relationship never truly ended.
Today, large financial institutions work with governments, not against them. Housing policy reflects this reality. Taxes and regulations disproportionately affect small landlords. Corporate structures are more flexible. Losses can be offset. Interest can be managed differently. The result is predictable. Small owners exit, large owners consolidate. This isn't ideological, it's mechanical. Now think about what this means for tenants. When housing is owned by individuals, flexibility exists. Human judgment, conversation, context. When housing is owned by institutions, systems rule. Algorithms decide. Policies override nuance. Processes replace people. That may sound efficient, until shelter becomes conditional. Digital identification, automated screening, centralized compliance. When homes are controlled by entities too large to negotiate with, power shifts, not because of intent, but because of scale. Now here's where the mainstream narrative becomes dangerous. People are told property is finished, landlords are doomed, prices will fall, renting is the future. But the people with the most data and the most capital are acting as if the opposite is true. They are buying aggressively. They are retaining assets. They are positioning for long-term scarcity. When institutions and individuals disagree, institutions usually win. We've already seen this in London. Home ownership is increasingly limited to people who bought decades ago, the very wealthy, or overseas capital. That model is spreading.
Data already shows a significant share of UK property, especially at the top end, being purchased by overseas buyers, not because they love Britain, but because UK property offers legal security, global demand, and long-term appreciation. This makes it an ideal store of value. And when global money enters a local market, local wages cannot compete. Now, this isn't a call to panic, it is a call to understand, because the worst position is being confident in the wrong narrative. If you watch what institutions do instead of what commentators say, a clear pattern emerges. They expect inflation to persist. They expect currency value to erode. They expect hard assets to outperform. They expect housing demand to remain permanent. That's why they don't want cash. Cash loses value quietly. Assets compound silently. This isn't secret knowledge, but it is uncomfortable knowledge, because it means waiting is also a decision, and time is the one asset you cannot recover. The UK property market isn't collapsing, it's consolidating.
And consolidation always rewards those who understand early. By the time this becomes obvious to everyone, the question won't be, should I buy? It will be, why didn't I understand this sooner? And that is the real risk most people face. Not losing money, but losing time.